What was that internal spark or aha moment that sort of made you want to walk away from multi-million-dollar deals?
With 175,000 Americans each year dying of opioid addiction, it is something that we all want to try to avoid.
Our current standards of care right now are so inadequate for so many patients.
After years in investment banking, over 2 decades, about 25 years, I wanted to move from advising businesses to helping build one.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you're going through?
Surgical intervention that largely doesn't work. You've got conservative therapy that's a revolving door. We take stem cells from the patient's own bone marrow and then we inject them directly into the damaged spinal disc. Maybe it's 11 minutes, the entire procedure.
Well, yeah, I applaud you. I know it's a rigorous process.
The objective is really to help. We aren't pretending to be biotech, we are biotech. Some very attractive people with glossy brochures talking about how scientifically validated their products are. How do we really know what's being injected, to use your point, into one's shoulder? Comparing apples and orangutans, the mice actually lost weight consistent with some of these GLP-1s, and not only that, but without side effects. Our signal, based on blinded data, is clearly way ahead of that 30% threshold we expect to unlock second quarter of 2027.
Maybe more men should be doing be doing this type of skincare, right?
Surprised.
Yeah?
You'd be surprised, yeah.
Lance, welcome to the show. It's nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me. I'm well.
I'm glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about where are you calling in from? Or what part of the country are you in?
So we're in the Northeast. We're in New York. We're located, our headquarters is in Suffolk County, Long Island, a small town called Melville. And here we have our corporate offices as well as our manufacturing facility here in Melville.
It's making sense to me because I know that you had worked for a couple of decades as an investment banker at some of the big banks. And so let's start there. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, but also, what was that internal spark or aha moment that sort of made you want to walk away from stitching together, multi-million-dollar deals and take the helm of leading a biotech company?
So what attracted me specifically to BioRestorative was the combination of compelling science, obviously a very large unmet medical need, and a clear opportunity to create long-term value. After years in investment banking, and when I say years, I mean over 2 decades, about 25 years, I wanted to move from advising businesses to helping build one with the potential to fundamentally improve patients' lives. What stood out immediately was that BioRestorative was not pursuing incremental innovation, but rather it was developing regenerative therapies that could meaningfully change how chronic conditions like back pain and metabolic disorders are actually treated. Just as important, the company's platform approach that we created appeals to me from a strategic perspective. We're advancing both clinical therapeutics and commercial biologic technologies, which creates a more diversified and sort of balanced model that most early stage biotech companies don't necessarily have. That combination of innovative science, operational discipline, and real world patient impact kind of gave me the conviction that this was a business worth leading and operating. And of course, after 25 years of being on the advisory side, advising boards and CEOs of some of the largest medical technology, pharma companies in the world, the desire to invest from an investor's perspective, but also to have a proprietary interest in driving some of these unmet needs after having the opportunity to see the comprehensive landscape of major therapeutics treating big swaths of the global population and really understanding, where those unmet needs are and how to find the right technology. And in our case, we view that we have this blue chip technology that can address, this massive unmet need where today there just isn't an acceptable outcome.
We're going to jump into that in just a moment. I'm always curious when, given the leap that you've made in coming over and taking over the helm, I know you've been at BioRestorative now for a number of years. You started as a chief strategy officer, now CEO since 2020. But I'm just curious, when you joined the company, me, what were the blind spots that you quickly had to kind of navigate or identify, if there were any? And like, just curious how that, during that transition, if you had any blind spots and what did you learn from them?
As strategy officer, it kind of gave me a broad understanding of the company's scientific platforms, the regulatory priorities, the operational infrastructure, and of course, capital allocation strategy. And, that kind of allowed me to work closely with our scientific and clinical teams while also understanding the realities of what it takes to really scale a regenerative medicine company. I guess the biggest adjustment was transitioning from strategic planning to direct operational execution. And in regenerative medicine, I think success largely depends not only on ambitious science, but also on disciplined clinical execution, manufacturing consistency, regulatory alignment, and of course capital management. So once I became CEO, the focus really became ensuring that each part of the organization, from clinical development to manufacturing and commercialization, operated all in alignment with long-term value creation. And I think that when you approach that from a strategy perspective, you're more siloed. As you're elevated into the CEO role, you have to take on all of those verticals in combination and see how they overlap. Also, if you think about it as a Venn diagram, you also overlay strategic priorities as well as capital formation and all those verticals on top of one another. So that was really the blind spot, is not having the purview of doing it all at once.
You mentioned at the outset here that there's a lot of unmet need in this low back pain, degenerative disc disease market. Can you tell us a little bit about the market and why our current standards of care right now are so inadequate for so many patients?
So current treatment approaches for degenerative disc disease are largely focused on symptom management rather than addressing the underlying source of the pain. So patients are often treated with physical therapy, anti-inflammatories, steroid injections, pain medications, opioids, and surgery. I don't think the podcast is long enough to get into each one of those, but opioids alone, we can talk for hours. And that's a problem that's getting worse, not better. So with 175,000 Americans each year dying of opioid addiction, it is something that we all want to try to avoid. These options may provide temporary relief. They do not repair the damaged disc itself, and that's really the problem. As a result, many patients cycle through, I call it the revolving door. They cycle through repeated interventions on the conservative therapy side without achieving durable improvement. So there remains this very large, significant unmet need for minimally invasive therapies that can target the underlying biological damage, restore function, and potentially reduce reliance on opioids or surgical intervention that are invasive and traumatic and costly, and a whole host of issues that drive payers, specifically the insurance companies that control the healthcare spend, drive them crazy. Revision rates can be up to about 35 to 40% in some cases. So you have surgical intervention that largely doesn't work. You've got conservative therapy that's a revolving door. And I think what we've done is we've created this, or there exists this crevasse of opportunity to provide a product solution that actually solves the problem and not just treats the symptoms.
Look, this is an area that I think everybody knows somebody going through this. And I've had family members dealing with bad backs and going through this standard treatment loop that you've described, and even gone through surgery, which works for a short while. But then, like, I think you meant that recidivism rate or relapse rate is quite high. So are you saying that people might be able to completely avoid some of those therapies, or would your therapies kind of like, where would they fit in the algorithm? Could you not potentially have to go through surgery or not have to be on opioids and just go right to regenerative medicine approach?
Well, that's exactly the goal. I mean, we can't be everything to everyone. Every pathology is different, but generally the goal would be for BRTX 100, which is the product candidate's name. That's what we're looking to accomplish, not only to avoid surgery, but avoid the pharmacological approaches as well that may lead to the addiction and the addiction-related deaths. Today, most treatments for chronic back pain are really designed to manage the symptoms, not repair the damaged disc. So patients often go from injections to pain medications, eventually to surgery, because nothing is actually healing the underlying problem, and there's no acceptable solution between those two bookends. With BRTX 100, We take stem cells from the patient's own bone marrow. We strengthen and expand those cells in a very specialized environment, and then we inject them directly into the damaged spinal disc through a minimally invasive outpatient procedure. Maybe it's 11 minutes, the entire procedure. The objective is really to help the body repair and to regenerate the tissue naturally rather than simply masking the pain. While, clinical studies are ongoing, the long-term vision is to give patients a potential alternative to invasive surgery and chronic pain management.
Can you tell us a little bit more about BRTX 100? You gave a little bit of an intro there, but when you talk about stem cell therapy, are these genetically modified? Are you doing anything to rejuvenate them in the lab before you give them back to the patient? Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you're going through in your trials to help patients?
Sure. I mean, we have this proprietary process where we use hypoxia. So the subject will first have a modified bone marrow aspiration. It's not a full bone marrow aspiration because we don't need a lot of matter. We just need a small amount. So there's a very modified aspiration and a simple blood draw. The materials are sent back to our ISO certified 7 clean room facilities, GCMP facilities certified by Department of Health, FDA. And then we use a very novel proprietary process where a lot of our IP resides called hypoxia or low oxygen tension. It's an expansion process that is important because it closely mimics the natural environment found inside the disc. So by cultivating the cells under a low oxygen condition during the manufacturing process, we believe we can enhance their regenerative potential, their survival, and functionality once they're transplanted back into the damaged disc. So this process is really designed to improve cell viability and persistence after injection while helping the cells better adapt to the harsh environment inside the degenerating disc. Compared to traditional cell expansion under normoxia, or like a 20% oxygen tension versus the hypoxia, which is less than 5%. Hypoxic culturing may provide a more physiologically relevant and potentially more effective therapeutic. We've analyzed hypoxic cell culturing versus normoxic cell culturing, and those cells, in fact, on the hypoxic side, transition into a new cell where they show and illustrate more of the therapeutic benefits that are associated with anti-inflammation, remodeling of the extracellular matrix within the nucleus pulposa, et cetera.
Well, I know that it appears like you presented results at an orthopedic conference earlier this year. I mean, what can you share publicly with what was presented there in terms of both efficacy and the actual safety profile of BRTX 100?
So as more data rolls in, albeit it's a blinded study, so we're not privy to the efficacy data, but from a safety perspective, we would know, and the safety profile remains pristine. We've completed dosing in our 99 patient phase 2 trial. It is a major operational and clinical milestone for the company. It transitions the program from active enrollment into treatment, into the follow-up and data evaluation phase, where our focus really shifts to monitoring durability of response, collecting long-term outcomes, and really preparing for the next stage of our regulatory pathway. Operationally, this allows us to begin reducing our trial-related expenses, which is really important in terms of our burn, while redirecting resources towards regulatory preparation, phase 3 planning, manufacturing readiness, advancing our other platforms like Thermostem and Biocosmeceuticals, which is our commercial program. Internally, it also reinforces the momentum that we're building through disciplined execution and regulatory alignment. So the results that we've been presenting in most of the conferences, and these are big stem cell conferences all over the world. We just came back from ISCT in Dublin, where we've talked about safety and blinded efficacy signals. On the safety side, totally pristine. No material adverse events, no significant adverse events related to the product. So that's really first and foremost what I think the FDA really cares about. It is the primary endpoint of the trial. From a primary efficacy endpoint, as you know, we have a reduction of pain and an increase of function with a minimum threshold of 30% based on some subjective testing, which is very typical for pain management trials. I will tell you that our signal based on blinded data for patients that have gone through 52 weeks of results is clearly way ahead of that 30% threshold. So we're delighted to see that kind of response. We're very optimistic as to what this could potentially look like at the end of the unblinding period. Data is currently locked. We expect to unlock second quarter of 2027, and we really believe that will be a major value-enhancing inflection point for the company.
Congratulations. That's fantastic progress and seems very promising. Like where, based on these positive signals, where would you be looking to develop the asset further into additional indications and, to unlock other markets? Looked like you were looking further up the spine in the cervical spine area. Is that a different indication, or can you tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about expanding the uses?
So today, we are very deep, obviously, along the regulatory pathway in our chronic lumbar disc disease trial. We also have an approval to initiate an IND for a phase 2 for cervical. We believe that this technology is extremely leverageable across all avascular zones, given the formulation and given the potency of the cells that we have cultured in that hypoxic environment. So if you think about the avascular zones in the body, it's not just the spine, but other areas of the body also maintain this very harsh environment. So we're talking about major areas of orthopedics like hips and knees and shoulders and wrists and elbows and all of these very avascular zones. So our belief is, while it would take a tremendous amount of capital planning to initiate INDs across all of these different indications, it is our belief that when we have an approval to commercialize product in one particular indication, I expect, not that we condone this, but I expect that many of the providers will be using this off-label and going into some of these other avascular zones. So that the opportunity is tremendous. It moves from tens of millions of patients into something much greater as you look at the entire musculoskeletal system.
I want to turn our attention now to Therostem. You mentioned briefly as your your business unit focusing on metabolic disease. And right now, Lance, the whole world is obsessed with the GLP-1 weight loss products, and people are finding out that when they stop them, they end up many of them the weight comes back on. I mean, how does your Therostem program, which I guess focuses on the brown fat, or it's the good fat, how is that approach differentiated from like the GLP-1s?
Yeah, the GLP-1s, they've shown that metabolic disease can be treated very effectively, but I think many patients experience weight gain once therapy stops because those drugs primarily manage appetite and caloric intake. Our Thermostem program is exploring a different approach, focusing on brown adipose tissue, often called good fat, as you mentioned, which plays an important role in how the body burns energy and regulates metabolism. So the goal is really to improve the body's natural metabolic function at a cellular level rather than simply suppressing appetite. If successful, therapies targeting brown fat stem cells could potentially provide more durable metabolic benefits by helping to restore healthier energy balance and metabolic regulation over time. This is early for us. We're in preclinicals. We did certain collaborations with University of Utah. We did mice models where we put mice into a state of obesity through high-fat chow. We took the brown adipose tissue. We created the brown adipose stem cells, and then we further differentiated into brown adipose adipocytes, which were then put onto a 3D matrix, the first of its kind, and then we implanted those into the fat pads of the mice. And after several periods of time looking at results, the mice actually lost weight consistent with some of these GLP-1s. And not only that, but without side effects, and the results demonstrated much stronger cardiovascular and respiratory output. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity. We think it's a very leverageable platform. We think that, big cap pharma would be very interested in developing and further assisting us in terms of the regulatory path to drive this type of technology, not to replace the GLP-1s by any means. We're not looking to do that, but looking to maybe use it as a complementary technology with GLP-1s such that we can help to manage the longer term durability as well as some of the side effects that are associated with the pharmacological solution.
Makes sense. It seems like a complementary approach that would work synergistically. And I think you said you're in the preclinical stage still for this, so you haven't So like when would you anticipate trying to move that into the clinic? Is that something like later this year or next year?
So we're really focused right now on getting to the results of our phase two on the BRTX 100 platform, as well as developing our biocosmetics. Capital planning, of course, would be associated with harnessing the preclinical work and developing that preclinical work into the clinic. So we anticipate that that is something that we're going to continue to do in certain capacity, given the capital planning aspect that would be associated with it. We have been able to develop from that stem cell line commercial opportunities in the cosmetics business because we believe that not every exosome is the same, whether they're derived from bone marrow aspirations or umbilical cord or brown fat tissue. They all have different applications. So we're able to then manage and use some of the technology that's inherent within that platform to develop some really interesting commercial technologies that are novel and unique.
Well, tell us a little bit, where are you with that biocosmeceuticals part of your portfolio? Tell us a little bit more about that and how you're using your expertise in stem cell and exosomes to skincare.
Sure. I mean, our biocosmeceutical platform leverages our experience in stem cell biology, regenerative signaling, and exosome science to develop products focused on skin health and hair health and visible aging. So we're developing proprietary secretome-derived cosmetic and dermatologic products that incorporate exosomes, cytokines, growth factors, all manufactured in our GCMP ISO certified 7 facilities. These are, biologic formulations which are designed to support skin repair, hydration, regeneration, and overall skin quality while applying the same scientific rigor and manufacturing standards and quality release standards across our broader regenerative medicine platform.
So I think many of the consumers out there, I would imagine mostly women, have been using, these trendy
And
ingredients like,
men, and men.
and okay, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe more men should be doing should be doing
Well,
this type of
you'd be
skincare, right?
surprised. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised. Yeah.
Okay. But so, I mean, I think then many consumers in general would probably, they've heard of the, trendy ingredients like hyaluronic acid and retinoic acid, but you're using these cell-based secretomes. So like if someone's scrolling through social media and, how would you kind of describe what exosomes are actually doing to skin cells to make their skin look younger?
Sure. So, on a very basic level, exosomes are essentially tiny biological messengers that are released by cells. And again, we have three different cell lines for which we would derive these exosomes from, which also makes us very unique. They carry signals that help cells communicate with one another and support processes involved in tissue repair and regeneration. In skincare applications, exosomes may help support how skin cells repair themselves, how they respond to stress, maintain healthy function. The goal is not simply to temporarily moisture the skin, but to help promote healthier looking skin through regenerative signaling pathways. What also differentiates our approach is that these biologic products are being manufactured using clinical grade processes in a GMP ISO certified 7 certified clean room facility, bringing a level of scientific rigor and quality control that's very uncommon in traditional skincare. So we aren't pretending to be biotech, we are biotech, as opposed to I don't want to disparage the community, but you will see, especially on social media, as you mentioned, some very attractive people with glossy brochures talking about how scientifically validated their products are. But we've had the ability to re-engineer some of these products and look at what those exosomes really are. And I would caution consumers to understand that not all exosomes are equal. It's how they're derived, how they're manufactured. We also hypoxically culture our exosomes because we want them to be at the highest level of resilience and survivability.
Lance, one area that I've been focusing on, and I've published my own kind of thoughts on what's happening with peptides and the regenerative medicine clinics that are popping up all over the place. We know this, my frustration is I know this is a bit of an unregulated space. space. And I think the current administration has given a little bit more leeway to those organizations. I'm just wondering your thoughts on like, where does that fit in overall in your commercial strategy, if at all? Because there's regenerative medicines out there that are doing like, this plasma-rich PRP type therapy. They're injecting stem cells into people's shoulders, claiming to do, regenerate shoulders and cartilage. And there's a whole industry around that already, right? So I'm wondering, you're obviously going through an rigorous FDA approach, doing trials to show efficacy. Not everyone does that, right? So I don't know if you have a point of view on what's happening in the market there.
We're big fans of any therapy that works, I will tell you that. But how do we really know what's being injected, to use your point, into one's shoulder just based on a simple bone marrow aspiration and spitting it down bedside and isolating what they believe to be the stem cells, which they're injecting directly? They're not characterizing those cells. We don't know if it's bone marrow aspirate. We don't know if it's cells. We don't know what kind of cells they are. Are they being harvested from rich areas that address the issue itself? So if it's a musculoskeletal pain, we know that mesenchymal cells are really an appropriate cell to manage that type of chronic pain. But where is it being harvested from? How is it being manufactured? It's not. It's really being spun down. So does it provide relief? Yes, maybe it does. But what we're talking about, comparing apples and orangutans in this case, because what we're doing is we're taking just a simple amount of that bone marrow aspirate and really differentiating it and isolating the cells. Once we have the cells, through series of passages and hypoxic culturing and being able to characterize what the cell looks like, what the cell contains, managing the resilience of that cell, being able to tell you exactly how many cells. In our chronic lumbar disc disease program, we're talking about 40 million hypoxically cultured mesenchymal cells that also we're adding, similar to PRP, but we're doing a next generation PRP. If you recall earlier, the process of the simple blood draw, we will crack open, we will lyse the platelets within the blood, and we'll bring forward all those therapeutic benefits. It's called autologous platelet lysate. And we'll combine that with the cells and we'll cryopreserve that before shipping to the clinic. And what that does is it provides sort of like the fertilizer to the seeds, and it keeps those cells warm and fuzzy and happy, and it enables those cells to maintain a level of resilience and survivability, so those cells can do exactly what they're intended to do within that residence. It also has a gelling effect. So when you inject it directly into the nucleus of the disc under fluoroscopy, that autologous platelet lysate begins to gel, and those cells are able to scaffold and proliferate and stay within residence as opposed to leaking out into other parts of the body. It's a completely different process, a different level of quality and control and understanding. And I think that's why the FDA really appreciates what we're doing. And by conducting these studies under the auspices of the FDA, we're required to demonstrate certain validations around these theories. So others just aren't able to do that. And I'm not saying that their technologies don't work. I'm just saying be very careful of what you put in your body, and having that oversight by the FDA, I think, is critical, especially as it relates to cell therapies. We don't want to spoil the broth. And this isn't about, in many cases, people looking for a commercial opportunity or a get rich quick type of it. This is about really addressing an unmet need for a huge swath of the population, doing it the right way with the right level of oversight and regulation, such that we are truly providing a long-term durable solution for this unmet need.
Well, yeah, I applaud you. I know it's a rigorous process going through the regulatory process with FDA to really demonstrate the efficacy and proof behind your entire platform. I think now that, if we look ahead at the next 12 or so months, if we look down the road, what are those maybe 2 or 3 corporate milestones that you would guide us towards looking at if we're going to follow the company? What should we be paying attention to?
Our long-term vision for the company is to become a leader in regenerative medicine with both therapeutic and commercial platforms delivering meaningful patient impact and long-term financial value. We believe there are multiple potential pathways to commercialization, including independent development, strategic partnerships, licensing opportunities, or combinations of all of those approaches, depending on the program and the market dynamics. We already see opportunities across clinical development, aesthetics distribution and metabolic disease partnerships. We are very focused on unblinding data, which is only 12 months down the road. And, while many investors may think of that as a long time, for us, it's right around the corner. And while we're waiting for this big value enhancing catalyst, if the data proves out the way we expect it will, we're building a commercial platform that will offset our working capital needs potentially, as well as become less dependent on external capital market needs. So truly running a business that can support itself, and by using some of that capital to further enhance our clinical programs, our pipeline activities, and some of our preclinical work as well.
So Lance, final question. If you could fast forward 5 years, thinking about that patient with back pain or struggling with their metabolic health, how might their medical experience look in the future based on what you're building right now?
Well, our hope is in 5 years from now, we'll have access to therapies that do more than simply manage symptoms, therapies that actually help restore function and address the underlying biology of the disease. Getting away from transactional-based medicine, I think, has been a major agenda for the current administration, and I think that feeling has also been pervasive throughout the FDA. Getting away from transactional-based medicine, looking at more solution-based medications and treatments, I think, is really first and foremost for someone living with chronic back pain or chronic pain within the musculoskeletal system. That could mean fewer opioids, fewer invasive surgeries, and potentially a minimally invasive regenerative treatment designed to help repair damaged discs. For metabolic health, it could mean therapies that support healthier energy regulation and metabolic function at the cellular level, instead of requiring lifetime dependencies on symptom-focused medications alone. And more broadly, we believe regenerative medicine has the potential to shift healthcare towards more restorative approaches that improve long-term outcomes and overall quality of life.
Well, I love it. I love what you're doing. As you mentioned, there's a tremendous unmet need anywhere where people are managing pain chronically with things that suppress symptoms but don't get to the underlying cause. I'm very bullish on regenerative medicines, and I just wish you the best of luck. So thanks, Lance, for joining the show today.
I had a great time. Thank you so much for those excellent questions, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the RX for Biotech podcast channel to hear directly from the leaders that are shaping the future of personalized medicines. And if you or someone you know is battling a health condition, visit therapyforme.ai to search for a specialist near you. Thanks for listening.